So, hi everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Tenacious Tycoons with me, Sarah Flynn, and my great partner in crime, Lee Isles. This week, under our core brand, is all about property, and you'll be very pleased to know that we've got an incredibly special guest, Paul Lanfear, who is a very, very good property investor and has been in the game for a number of years. So I will hand over to Lee just so he can introduce himself as well, and then we'll get right into it, and we will speak to Paul about his journey into property and where he foresees the market going. So, Lee?
Yeah, so hi again, guys. It's Lee here. So, as Sarah said, this week's all about property, and we've got Paul here, who's a bit of an expert and a guru in that field, shall we say. He's got a lot of experience and a lot of wisdom to share. So, we invited him along, and he's kindly come along to share some thoughts and give us a bit of guidance, I guess. So, I think to begin with, Paul, do you just want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, very good. Well, look, thank you both very much for the very kind invitation to be here. I am genuinely delighted to be here. Both of you got great values, and I know you'll be offering a lot to your tribe, your audience. So I'm really genuinely delighted to be here. So yeah, as the introduction goes, my name is Paul Lanfear. So I invest exclusively in Leeds in the property context. Been investing, for a long time, since the early 2000s, more professionally in the last decade or so. Yeah, we've got a broad portfolio here in Leeds, from little houses, little flats, to traditional house shares, and then the bigger sort of all singing, all dancing co-living spaces. So yeah, broad portfolio. Yeah, and done probably most of the things, no, a lot of the things you can do in property, made all of the mistakes happy to share those as well. Yeah, delighted to be here and happy to help in any way I can.
Fab, thank you very much for that introduction, Paul. So obviously this year has been, or this sort of last 2 years, coming into sort of 2 years really now, has been incredibly turbulent time, particularly in the property space. Has been real sort of ups and downs, right from the full market being closed in the first lockdown, and then obviously different rules and regulations have come about in terms of how we can view property, and the sort of permitted developments and the whole shebang really, and everything, even as far as obviously the stamp duty holiday that we've got at the moment. All sorts of weird and wonderful things have been happening in the property space, and given your level of experience, I suppose one of the things that we kind of wanted to ask you today that you would love you to kind of share with everybody is from your perspective, what have you seen happen in lockdown in the property market? Is it what you would have expected to kind of happen, and where do you see the sort of the property space going in the next sort of 12 to 18 months?
Okay, that's a really great question. I suppose, to get it out in the open, to give full disclosure, I'm not kind of an out and out property fanatic, and I would definitely steer away from the word guru as best I can. So I say that with full disclosure. So obviously I'm very happy that I have invested a good time in property. Again, sort of full disclosure, then the reason I got into it was because of the beloved Liz Lanfear, who's my wife and business partner. She started the business back in 2000. She rode that early period of rapid growth, had a child, and then when she was thinking about going back to it, she kind of said, look, I don't want to do this on my own. I would like you to run the business and manage the business and promote the business, and I just want to be in the background doing the property. And so I come from that perspective. So I'm not a property fanatic. I think I think it's an enormously powerful tool, particularly for the foundations of wealth, for as a cash flow strategy. But I'm not. I take a more balanced view, which I'll happily go on and talk to in more due course. So with that said, this year, this COVID year has been absolutely full of surprises. I mean, it's been just incredible. I mean, I follow a few economists, and I remember in the January of last year, they were sort of in their newsletters and stuff, they were saying, this is a big deal, all right? This is a big deal. Pay attention. This is a big deal. So, I was going to London a couple of times a month. I started, bought a mask, and I started, thinking about whether it was still a good idea to keep going to London. And then it obviously all kicked off in March, didn't it? I suppose I think where we are now is fundamentally a much better place than we could be. I think I have no interest in party politics. I have given that up years ago. From the perspective of our politicians are not here to serve us. That is apparent. But I also say that as without any hint of criticism as well. I think we are where we are. I think we've had to make some difficult choices. I was directly responsible for the, unfortunately, the latter stages of the health of an elderly relative. And it's the only thing I can compare it to. And I remember how difficult it was. It's very difficult to make decisions week in, week out. Things change really quickly. So anyway, that said, I think we're in a better position than we could be. I honestly thought it was potentially going to be the zombie apocalypse. I thought, here we go, 1929, blood in the streets, really serious problems. And we may have some of that to come. But I think we're in a much better position than if we had not had the direct intervention of the government in all of the marketplaces in which we participate. And the libertarians and the free marketers will say it's an outrage, and we're paying this off for generations. Of course we will, but I think the humanitarian in me also thinks we do have to look after the people, and of course there are going to be consequences that our kids will live with. But we're in a better position than we could be. Where do we go from here? I mean, it actually, really, I can't believe I'm going to say this, but I do think we are going to head into a really remarkable growth cycle for the next 5 years. I think the government will continue to support that. This is obviously going to be dated, so we'll see if my predictions work out well. But I think we're looking at long-term low interest rates, not because the government that's an aspiration that they have, but they are now so burdened with debt that they can't put the interest rates up. So we've got long-term interest rates, great for investors, terrible for savers, and we're going to see asset price inflation like nobody's business. Not necessarily in all areas, but we're going to see, as a broad generalization, we're going to see it. I mean, we can see it now. Look at the price of copper, 10 years highs. Look at the price of some of the alternative assets like the cryptos, they're going to the moon, as goes the expression. Look at the boring stuff like steel, lumber. All of this stuff is going up in many ways exponentially. And that I think will percolate through the housing market. The housing market's obviously a bit slower. It's not got the same liquidity as some other marketplaces have. The price adjusts much at a more steady pace. I think the challenge that this all brings us, I mean, it's great. It's great for professional investors. It's great for people who are market participants. It is awful for people who do not own assets and do not have an occupation where they are given an above inflation pay rise every couple of years. Those people will unfortunately pay the price for it. But I think if you're asking me just for a purely property market point of view, that's where I think we're going.
I think that was great, Paul, and I think that's one of the reasons why we enjoy talking to you when we wanted to get you on here, because although you've got a background in property and you've obviously got the experience in it, it's not your sole focus. And a big message that we talk about is not just to focus on that as a singular strategy and focus on just being property as your asset base and that's your sole business as well, your sole income, your sole cash flow, because it can be flexible, shall we say. And there's a lot of unknowns. I mean, what's happened in the last year, I don't think any of us would have predicted with property, but when we talk to yourself and what you've just spoken about there, it's a much more balanced opinion. It's not just a, right, look at property, that's going to solve all your problems solution. It's a look at it as part of the solution, but it's just a part of it. It's not the entirety. So yeah, it's definitely interesting to get that side of things. What do you think, Sarah?
So I totally agree with that. I suppose the only to offer balance and transparency, you know, I'm now able to articulate it in that way. But you know, if you'd asked me 8 years ago, you know, it was all in property all day, every day. You know, it's like, and I don't recommend this, but like, you know, opening the laptop at like 5 o'clock in the morning, which I specifically don't remember. I'm not a member of the, a member of the 5 a.m. club. I think it's nonsense. But anyway, for reasons which I'm happy to discuss, that for most people, that is not a functional way to live your life. If you have to, because you've got kids or, you know, all the rest of it, then yes. But I often think it's more ego driven than productivity driven. Anyway, but you know, I remember the days of 7 days a week. I remember the days of up at, you know, actively working at 5 o'clock in the morning. I remember being all in all of the time. And sometimes that's a necessary evil. That, I mean, that is the truth. If you want to do difficult things, that is what it requires of us. It requires, you know, I often feel like it requires of us as much as we're able to give, is the truth. But I think once you've got there, you got that through that difficult first 2 years, you know, by about year 5, you know, you get so many different opportunities available to you, different people, different asset classes, different learnings, different perspectives. At that point, you know, I'm a real believer in then diversification. I'm a huge kind of fan of Ray Dalio, the greatest hedge fund manager in the world. You know, and his all-weather portfolio. That's what I have you know, kind of tried to emulate and construct. So I think it's only fair to say, yeah, you have to be all in, you know, at the beginning, and it's brutal, unforgiving, difficult. As we've all experienced, but I think there's an opportunity later in the cycle to add real diversification. But I think what you two are both very good at and very mindful of is balancing health with all of this, you know, because there is no point, you know, achieving all your financial goals if you're, you know, if you're completely exhausted and you're depressed and all the rest of it, which of course you can be forgiven for because it's really difficult, but that's not the plan, is it? That's not the plan. I know, Sarah, you're good at, you know, balancing your meals. I know you've got a family. You know, I think you two are definitely on the path. I wish I'd been on that path earlier, in a way.
Yeah, thank you for that, Paul. And I think it was interesting when you were talking about those kind of opportunities, because, and when you're talking about the capital growth, particularly in the market across all assets really, but specifically on the topic of property, you know, and it was funny because I think, you know, we all sort of sat in a room a year ago and everybody predicted that the market was going to crash, and yet here we are now all saying actually there's going to be no crash. We all think it's going to keep going up, which just seems insane really from what we all kind of first anticipated. But that does beg the question, you know, if asset prices and property specifically, as we're talking about today, is going to continue to increase, where do you see the opportunities for investors? Because I think there could be an argument to be had that you know, property prices at the minute are already, particularly in the residential space, very high, making it much harder for deals to stack. So, you know, from your perspective, what do you think would be the best opportunities from a strategy perspective, looking into sort of the second half of 2021 and into 2022?
So I think that's a great question. And I think one of the things that points us towards is this concept of a market. Mm-hmm. So the property market really isn't a market at all. It's one of the great learnings that I've had. It's hundreds, if not thousands, of different markets, and both geographically and across property type, and they behave in some cases radically differently. They move in a completely different direction. So where do I think the opportunity is? I mean, there will be being an investor. It brings with it everybody's got their own objectives. That's the key thing, isn't it? So if you're very liquid, you've got lots of cash. Let's say you have sold a business recently, or you've received a large inheritance, or whatever it is, but you're very, very liquid. But you don't really want to be a hardcore property investor. You don't really want to go to property meetings. You're reasonably well capitalized. You just want a return on your capital. But you're interested in property, then you could probably do no better than go to the marketplace, buy things at more or less market value, have them really well managed, take further advances when the market allows, and just steady Eddie, keep boring is best, as Liz sometimes says to me, and just let and follow through the process. That's obviously very, very different to if you were in the position that we were in when we start kind of re-emerge, or I started professionally and Liz re-emerged, where we had put, like many people do, everything that we had in our house. So we happened to live in our dream home, which is a really wonderful thing. And the challenge it brought is we had gone all in on that. And so we, in order to grow for the next stage of grow, we had to develop the skills to work with private investors, which we did, very, very competently. They have all done very, very well. They have in many cases done better than we have, because that's the nature of providing a good return to an investor. They will always win the project, and that's quite right as well, and as that should be. So obviously your approach is different. So if you're not liquid, then you have to approach it differently, don't you? Where do I think the opportunity is? I think obviously there are going to be pockets of opportunity in areas that do not recover. And I say I take no pleasure from this, but there will be areas of the UK which simply do not recover, and where there is a lack of employment, you will see house prices respond accordingly. And yeah, I take no pleasure in that. That is just the reality of life. And if you're in a position to buy those properties, offer people, warm, safe, long-term accommodation, then you're doing a great public service, and you should do that, and you should continue to do that. Where do I think the real opportunity is? I think it's going to be probably failed commercial space. So it probably less so in London, if we're honest, because London has so many well-capitalized investors in it. Much of that stuff will be hoovered up it was not going to be around for long. There's some very, very big players. There's some very well capitalized players. I mean, I know lots and lots of people who are in the London space. They're all going in guns blazing. They've all got enormous sums of money. They don't need to get a great deal. A few of them, very experienced, know all the tricks of the trade as well. So they will create value in ways that many of us mere mortals won't be able to. But I do think outside of London, failed commercial. I mean, a lot of the offices, there's that big wave, wasn't there, of office conversions, and we all thought that had come to an end. Well, I mean, there's going to be some office space coming back on. There's got to be flexibility in that respect. There's going to be, and so I think that's the opportunity. And I think the opportunity is to convert it to residential, or a big proportion of it to residential, because historically, residential property has always recovered much quicker out of recessions than commercial property. So I think that's probably where, for many investors, that's where the opportunity lies. I think there's niche areas as well, like warehousing, and some of the industrial stuff that we're going to need post Brexit and post a more protectionist economic environment. But I think they're very niche areas. I wouldn't recommend really anybody, if you're not already in that space, I probably wouldn't go into it. But I do think, let's all look for the failed commercial. Let's try and repurpose it. Let's make great places to live, lots of amenity space, and all the rest of it. I do think that's an angle, and obviously making out of those flats, if you own a whole freehold block of flats, they are a great investment. I know some investors kind of promote other strategies over them, but if you've got a freehold, you own the freehold, you own all of the flats, and you can get the gearing right, the returns are absolutely phenomenal. I mean, I know people that's their primary strategy, and when you actually find out what their profits are, it's a little bit eye-watering, I have to say. So that's the direction of travel I would, obviously not offering any financial advice, but that's the direction of travel I see in the marketplace.
Yeah, of course, and thanks for sharing that, Paul. I mean, it's great to get your insight into this as well as what we kind of already think. And I mean, just speaking personally, from my opinion, I do think the development type routes are quite lucrative for what will happen with the various property markets. And I like the fact that you said there are obviously multiple markets within markets within property, because there are. But just looking at the three of us in terms of what we're currently considering, I mean, we've got Sarah's doing developments to convert houses to houses with multiple occupancy, so that you can get more people in there. Obviously, that's a way to boost the cash flow for it, but it does require a bit of development work. I'm stepping into the conversion space, as you've just mentioned there, because again, I just see the returns are available, and it's the fact that commercial generally is valued cheaper than residential, and the opportunities there are much more significant than trying to find deals on the market, especially in a booming market, which we seem to be in at the moment, especially if it's going to continue growing. And then I know that you're, again, as you already mentioned, looking into the commercial space anyway, because again, there's going to be a lot of opportunity there with, I agree, kind of maybe not so much the offices, but certainly shops that are going to shut down. There'll be a lot of space in the city centres. I think there'll be a lot more locality to the way people shop, and as you say, warehouses and storage depots and things like that for online services are going to be key, really, aren't they?
And I don't think it's, I think it's really easy, particularly with the media that we have, and their objective is obviously to keep us watching the media and consuming it and what have you. So I think it's very easy to think that the world is all, going to hell, and, it's all awful and everybody hates each other. And it is genuinely not true. None of that is true. I think we are at, there's a really interesting, very, very impressive investor called Kathy Wood, who runs a fund called ARC. You can do your own research on it. It's just one of our researchers did a great paper about disruptive innovation back in May 2019. One of the many interesting things she says is that we are at an inflection point. And what she means by that is that, the future is not going to be the same as the past. And we have to realize that we are going in a different direction. And she harks back to, I think it's the electric light bulb, cars and the telephone all became mainstream all at the same time. And she points towards, I think, 5 areas where she says that these are coinciding. Leaving that aside, but taking the theme with us, we are definitely at an inflection point. We are definitely in an inflection point. There is no going back. There is nothing to go back to. So let's not worry about the way the world used to be. We are going to go forwards, and it's going to be a better version of what we ever had before. It's just going to be different. We just need to get our heads around it. But I mean, I feel so optimistic about what the future is for all of us, for those that follow us. This is genuinely one of the greatest times ever to be alive, and and to be an investor in the property space, to be doing whatever to do whatever we're doing. We've got such great opportunities, and bringing that back to developments and stuff. We're creating incredible places for people to live, which I hope are going to really work in this new environment. We know that people like to shop a little bit more local to home now. We know that many people will work from home many days a week, so they're going to need places to pop into. There's all of that as an opportunity. And then, of course, there's the people who've up sticks. They've all moved to Devon and they've all become surfers. And then there's a whole new market for holiday homes, which are apparently up like 15+% a year. So there's opportunity anywhere, is the way I see it.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more there. It's funny because Lee and I in a previous episode were talking about this sort of concept of, as I like to call it, that I've definitely ripped off from Kevin Hart, staying in your lane. And I think that's never been true. So basically, in one of his stand-ups, he kind of talks about this whole scenario where he goes to meet very, very famous basketball player, just as he's sort of up and coming in his fame, and this guy invites him to go around Disneyland with his kids. So he shows up really sort of eager and enthusiastic at the gates of Disneyland, and he then realizes that there is nobody else in Disneyland apart from him and his kids and the basketball player and their kids. And that's because that this guy has literally like hired out the entirety of Disneyland, and Kevin Hart definitely wasn't prepared for that. And then he sort of has a great time, but he promptly comes home and his message is, just kind of staying in your lane. But I think that that's really translatable to the property space, because a bit like anything, we have all these kind of fads, like you were just saying now, essays through the roof, everybody's doing serviced accommodation, and for the next kind of 12 to 18 months, it's going to be an incredibly lucrative business, and those people that are in it are going to do exceptionally well out of it. But that will come and it will go, and things will change, and I think that's really important about staying in your own lane. So whatever your path is and whatever you choose, you can make that work, because as you say, there, as you were saying, Paul, kind of anywhere there are pockets of niches, and there are pockets for your own strategy to make that work in kind of whatever way you want to make that work. So I think they were a really good point, well made there. So kind of final question from us then, and I think really it's around sort of any advice that you could give, I suppose, if there was kind of one piece of advice, lessons learned in the property space from this year, what would it be if you were going to give sort of a budding, brand new, I suppose, property investor for 2021, a bit of a piece of advice, a golden nugget, we will call it, Paul, a golden nugget. What do you think that would be?
Okay, so I'm going to take an absolute liberty here and say it's going to be 3 things. Which I appreciate is immediately what the instructions are not to do. So the first is you will often come across people in property circles and indeed other circles, and they will tell you, that they are a self-made man. I'm thinking of someone very particularly who once said this to me. I am absolutely not that, and I never have been. Ever since I can remember, I have always sought out. I've always stood on the shoulders of giants, and I'm not embarrassed to admit it. I've always sought out people who are better than me, who I have, by hook or by crook, offered them with an exchange of value, managed to kind of get underneath their wing for a little bit. And I've done this in different contexts. Like when I first played the guitar, I wanted to be a rock star. So when I first picked up a guitar, I got, guitar teachers and mentors, and, there were some really great guitarists around where I lived, and I would do pretty much anything to kind of get around them. And, I'd move amps and go to gigs and try and learn from them. And then when I went into professional life, I really sought out mentors in that respect. And, I made myself useful to them, and they taught me so much. And I think about them literally every week. I think about some of the mentors I've had, because I've learned so many things. Similarly in property, there's one thing like paying for the education, which we've all done, and very, very significantly so. But I also think execution is the key. And I personally have found it difficult to translate knowledge through to execution. So I think that is a big thing for me, and that's what I try and help other people with. So first thing is don't go alone. Stand on the shoulders of giants. Just cut to the chase. Don't reinvent the wheel. Find somebody who is a little bit ahead of you, and follow in their footsteps. Now that isn't. That is unlike, for most people, that is unlikely to be me personally, because as you saw me wince when Lee said property guru, but the easiest way to access me virtually for free is to attend my breakfast meeting. So my Leeds property breakfast meeting, if you connect with me through social channels, perhaps we can put a link below, you know, come to my breakfast. And, you know, I think both you guys will know, I mean, anyone who ever gets in touch with me, the answer is always the same. Yes, I will help you. I will do what I can to help you, you know, bullshit free as well. Just come to my breakfast and I'll come and help you. And I've said that to everybody who's ever reached out to me, and I mean it from my heart. And about 10% of people do. And about those 10% of people I feel like I help. So there you go. The other 90% of people, I understand why they don't follow through. It is life. But yeah, that's the thing there. Secondly is stick with the problem. And now it's either Isaac Newton, or I think it's Isaac Newton. He was asked why he was able to solve all of these difficult problems, and his answer was stick with the problem. He said, I'm not gifted, but I stick with the problem long enough to solve it when others give up. And I would say that's definitely true. So I don't have patience as a virtue. I was never blessed with it. But there's a lovely book called The Compound Effect, and he talks about the rule of 2, which is everything you ever want to do in life is going to take twice as long, be twice as hard, and cost twice as much. And that is a lesson which I found really hard to learn. Full disclosure, I found that really hard to learn, that you know, it takes longer, and you know, it doesn't all happen in a year, sadly. So that's the lesson I'd say that. And then thirdly, is it's a marathon, not a sprint. Marathon, not a sprint, which is, you know, it's all the good stuff. You know, it's you got to look after the you are the best investment you'll ever make, and that is 100% true. I can tell you that because I can see it with my own eyes. So, you know, sleep well, eat well, exercise, see your friends, ideally be in love. You know, all of the stuff we know is good for us. Continue to do that, and you know, try and moderate some of the other activities that we can engage in, and all will be well. But it's a marathon, it's not a sprint. And I speak from experience from that. You know, several times a year, I have to have a firm word with myself. I have to sit down and say, come now, Lanfear, you need a good long weekend off. You need to turn that phone off, because I do love what I do. I do really get into it. I get a little bit obsessed with what I'm doing, and you know, whether it's going well or whether it's going badly, and that's an element of my personality I need to manage. So yes, it's a marathon, not a sprint.
Yes, they're excellent points, and again, thank you for the advice, Paul. It's fantastic. I think the last one, though, in particular, switching off, it's so important. And what you really summarised in that last point, that last bit of advice, is really what we're trying to communicate here. It's around about building up a really healthy life so that you can enjoy things that you do. So if you do build out a big business, whether it's property or otherwise, whether you do day trading, stocks and shares, there's no good in winning at it, for want of a better term, if you can't enjoy, you know, the rewards for it. You need to have the good balance. So yeah, thank you for saying that, because you just kind of underpinned what we're trying to communicate as well.
My pleasure.
Fab. Well, thank you very much, Paul, for today. It's been an absolute pleasure speaking to you, and thank you for imparting all your words of wisdom. You are very knowledgeable in everything. We won't brand you again as a property guru, we promise. I might brand you as a wealth guru. We'll see if I can get away with that. But definitely we won't call you property guru again. But you are very, very, very well versed in the property space, and you have shared some incredible pieces of advice today. So thank you very much for joining us, and thank you everybody for listening.
Yeah. Well, thanks very much for the invitation. I really appreciate it. And anybody's very welcome to connect with me through the usual channels. So I'm Paul Lanfear on virtually all the platforms. And yeah, you're welcome to get in touch. Directly through Instagram is probably the easiest way. But yeah, thanks very much for the invitation. It has been a real pleasure.
Absolutely. And thanks again for coming. And everyone, as Paul said, they can connect with him on all the various channels, but the Property Breakfast is highly recommended from both myself and Sarah, I'm sure, because we have been regular attendees. So yeah, thanks again, everyone, and we'll see you soon.
Okay.